Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take care of buying buildings. Therefore, we are going to require our buildings to have a script that allows us to do that. So let's go ahead and create a new script here. And I'm going to call this one building. Okay, so this will be the building script. And I'm going to assign it to each of my buildings. So to the building game objects that we have here. So let's select all of them and let's drag this building script in there. So now it will be available on all three buildings here. Okay, that's one way of doing it. So now let's plan for a bit. By default, we want our building to be locked. So when we press the buy button, we want to unlock our building, and that means to enable the building visuals and start making profit. Also in the future, we want our game to be saved. So once open, the game, every time we need to check if our building is unlocked or not. It's very important to plan ahead when we start writing code so that we don't end up removing or changing a lot of our code. That being said, let's add a few references and variables to our building. So let's open up the building script here. First, we need a reference to our buy button and the building visuals. So let's go ahead and add those in here. So these two private game objects that we can assign in Unity, but that are going to be only available inside of this building script. Also, we need to have access to our buy button text because we want to change the price of the individual purchases every single time that we increase the value, right? So buying upgrades is going to be more and more expensive. So if we want to use text, we of course need to add the UI namespace here of Unity Engine as well. Now we of course also need to make sure that we are storing the cost of the building. So the current cost of the building should be a public value that I'm going to set here. So public big integer, and of course if we want to use big integers, we need to use this numerics namespace in systems. So in system.numerics. So if we save the script and look at the inspector, we won't be able to set our big integer here. So you see, we can set the building visuals as well as the buy button. We cannot set the number, however, this big integer. So there's a simple workaround for this. So let's go over to building, and now let's create a private variable. I'm going to call this one cost representation, and it will be a string. So we can enter a very big number in there now, but for our public big integer cost, we need to overwrite it. So you saw already that I used a capital letter here. That's something that you usually do with your properties. So now I'm going to override it. Let's look at that. So first of all, we set our getter to return whatever the cost representation is as a big integer. So we are parsing it. To parse means to convert. So we are converting the string, which is this cost representation, which is just a text, even though it's a number, but it's still a text in terms of programming. And we're converting it into an actual number, so into a big integer. Now, if we want to set it, we're just going to set the value that we're assigning to the cost. We're converting it into a string and we're assigning it to our cost representation here. So our cost representation is super closely linked to our cost, because basically we are storing the cost inside of the cost variable, but it's also stored in the cost representation and can also be retrieved from there. So next we are going to require a variable that states whether our building is locked or unlocked. So by default, I'm going to say that it is locked, which means is unlocked is going to be set to false. And now inside of our start method, we can go ahead and initialize a bunch of our variables. So first we need to initialize the text, and we're going to get the text directly from the component in children of our buy button. So if we look at our buy button here inside of the building canvas, this buy button has a text. So if we assign this buy button to our building's game object here, so let me do that real quick, like so. Then this buy button has a child, that is the text, and then we can now access it by using the text component. So we have this text game object that is inside of the buy button game object, which is the child of the buy button, and it has a component called text. So we got changing the text of it there, or we can access the text there. So now in our building 1, let's also add the building visuals like so. So now we should be good to go when it comes to that. Let's go back to our code, however. So now we have the text. We can set the text of that button text to be the cost as a string, because the cost is a big integer, so we're converting it into a string. Then we need to make sure that the button is going to be either active or inactive. So I'm going to say that it is unlocked. So whatever is unlocked is, so here by default it's false. We're going to say that it's going to be, so in this case we're going to make the button active. And then we're going to set the buildings visuals as well. So building visuals set active to is unlocked. So in this case, we're going to set them to false. And once they are unlocked, we are setting them to true, which means we're going to activate the building itself. Otherwise, the building will be invisible. And now let's actually take care of the buy logic. Okay, so once we click on the buy button, so let's go ahead and create a method here. So once we click on the buy button, I want to do a couple of things. First, I'm going to check if the building is unlocked or not. So if is unlocked is not true, which means if the building is not unlocked, then buy something, but only run this code here if the buy operation worked. So we have a certain cost assigned to the building, right? So here at the top, we say buying this building costs, let's say 10 euros at the beginning. So 10 euros, we're calling the money manager.instance buy. So here, let's go over to the buy method. We're calling this buy method, which checks if we can buy it, because it checks, do we have enough money? And if we have enough money, it's going to return true. So this method will return true because it returns a boolean, right? So then if it returns true, this code will be executed. So if we have enough money to pay the cost. So we're not taking any loans or anything here. So we just work with cash. So then we're saying, okay, now the building will be unlocked. And we're going to make sure that the building visuals are also visible. And then we're also making sure that the button, the buy button, is going to be invisible. So we're deactivating it. Now you see one thing that we're doing here, we're using moneymanager.instance.buy. So we're not creating another instance or an object of the money manager here, because there is a instance already. So we're using a singleton here, which means that this money manager will be accessible throughout our entire project, and we can just access its instance and call its methods very easily. So that's the advantage of having a singleton here. All right, so now let's save the script once again, and let's make sure that we can actually buy buildings. So let's go over to our building 1. We should also have a cost representation. Okay, let me set that to 0 because the first building will be for free. So let's run the game. And we should see that our building disappears. There we are. So now we see the price of 0. But even if we click on it, nothing happens. Well, the visual representation changes here, but nothing happens. And that has to do with our button not executing anything. So here in the buy button, let's add an on-click event, and let's drag the building 1 in here, the game object. And here now we can access building, the script building, and I'm going to execute on buy button. All right, so now on buy button will be called, which is, if we look at it, this method that we just created. So it's going to check if we're unlocked, and if we are not unlocked, then we can buy the building with the cost associated to it or with it. And as I'm setting the cost representation to 0, so the first building will be for free, I will be able to purchase it. So now let's test it. Let's click on the button. We see the house disappears. And once we click on the button, the house appears. And now we just need to start making money. So in the next video, we're going to make profits and collect those profits. So see you there.